Sponsored by Ultimate. My vote, my health.
Here are Charles Feldman and Mike Simpson.
Welcome to the KNX News Mayoral Debate. I'm Charles and he is Mike, and we are your moderators. And our goal for the next hour is to prepare the city, all the voters, for a decision about this city's future. Your choices stand before you. Congresswoman Karen Bass and businessman Rick Caruso.
There will be another chance for applause at the very end, but we're going to ask the audience to stay silent during the debate. Here's how it's going to work. Charles and I are going to ask some of the questions, and we're going to keep things moving. Other questions are going to come from our panel. We have Seth Lemon. He serves as managing editor for all things digital at KNX. He's a former CBS News correspondent. Giselle Fernandez is a senior anchor and reporter at Spectrum News 1 and is a veteran broadcast journalist here in Southern California. And Shar Jossell is a journalist, media personality, and host on Channel Q. That's Audacy's LGBTQ station here in LA.
And now here are the important rules. The topics and questions were chosen by us. They have not been shared with the campaigns in advance. Each candidate gets 60 seconds to answer each question. If a follow-up or a specific rebuttal is necessary at our discretion, the candidate gets 30 seconds to respond.
Now, before we get into things, a special thanks to Ultimate for sponsoring tonight's debate, which you can also watch. We're streaming right now at knxnews.com/debate.
Mr. Caruso won a coin toss and chose to get the last word tonight, so Congresswoman Bass is going to kick us off with her opening statement. Congresswoman Bass.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, let me thank our organizers and our listening audience. Angelinos, we know the way forward. We need real solutions and new leadership in City Hall to get big things done, to house people immediately, to make Los Angeles safer, and to make Los Angeles more affordable for everyone. But right now, our city is in a crisis. So from my days treating patients in the emergency room to bringing millions of dollars of COVID relief to our neighborhoods, I always step up in a crisis and get the job done. And Angelinos, you know who I am, a lifelong pro-choice Democrat who has always been on your side. In this election, let's stand for what we believe in. A city where we will finally solve homelessness, a city where we are feeling safe but actually are safe, and a city that doesn't price us out but actually counts us in. So let's build Los Angeles together, and I will be very honored to receive your support.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Rick Caruso, your turn.
Well, good evening. Again, thank you to everybody who put this together, and KNX in particular, and it's good being on stage with you, again, Congresswoman, so thank you for agreeing to this. Listen, I want to start out by sharing some things we have in common. What we have in common is that I'm a Democrat also, and excited to be running for mayor. And what we have in common is that I am pro-choice. And that's an important thing, not only in this city, but in this country. But let me talk about a couple of things that we differ. I don't think we feel safe. I disagree with the Congresswoman. I think people in this city are worried about crime. They're worried about homelessness. Homelessness has increased more than ever before. I'm a builder. You can't solve the problem unless you know how to build. And with all due respect, the Congresswoman's career has been in the legislature, and that's great, but she's never built. We have a lot of units to build. My plan is to build 30,000. The LA Times called my plan big and bold. It reported Karen's plan to be unambitious. That's a big difference, and I'm looking forward to talking about that and talking about all the matters that are going to be on the mayor's desk day one. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our first question is going to go to both of you, and it's going to go first to Mr. Caruso. And it's a kind of unusual question, I suspect, for a debate, because usually candidates like to come out and talk about what they want to do and what they can do. But so many polls and research say that people are incredulous. They think that politicians lie to them. They think that they make promises that they know they cannot possibly keep, all for the purpose of getting elected. So here's my question first to you, Mr. Caruso. If you are elected mayor of the city of Los Angeles, can you name 3 things that as mayor it is not in your power to do, and be very honest with voters, things that you cannot do?
Well, I tell you 3 things that I won't do. I believe in serving the public, and I will serve the public, and I'm not going to be a servant to special interest. And I think that's been a big problem with politics. I think that's the problem why we have homelessness at a great rise. I think that's why we have crime out of control. I'm not going to be involved in corruption. We've had too much corruption in this city. I mean, look at what's happened. And I'm sorry, my opponent is tied up in a federal corruption case. We've got to run a clean, organized, compassionate city. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to be strong. I'm going to be bold. I'm going to take time to represent the people that are in this city. You know, that's what we need. We need somebody every day waking up and saying, what's in the best interest of the city? I understand why politicians or people are skeptical of politicians. I am too. I'm not a politician. So I get the beauty of just waking up every day and representing you.
Your time is up, but also with due respect, you didn't answer the question. And the question was, and it goes to the heart of, if you are mayor, knowledge about what you can do and knowledge about what you can't. Every job has that, certainly the mayor.
You know what, Charles? I'm sorry. I don't know if I can go there with you, because I have built my career and my life being told what I can't do. I can't build a business. I can't be a young guy with just one person starting a company. I can't build the Grove. I can't build the Palisades. It will never happen. I just don't buy into what I can't do. What I do every day is there's a problem.
Okay.
I say, give me a solution to it. And I work towards a solution.
Thank you. Congresswoman Bass, same question.
So 3 things that I can't do. I can't control the health department. I can't declare a national state of emergency. And I can't remove some of the federal regulations around housing. But everything that you just said, I understand why voters are discouraged. Because you don't tell the truth. And that's the thing. You are a Democrat. Yes, you are a Democrat for about the last few months. I am a lifelong pro-choice Democrat. He is a builder, that's absolutely right, who has never built 1 unit of affordable housing. And when you lie to people and say that you're going to do these expansive things that you know good and well you can't do, that creates the cynicism within voters. So even though you've never been elected to office, unfortunately, you have been displaying some of the worst tendencies of what they say about elected officials.
I think I should be able to respond to
30 seconds.
30 seconds.
First of all, the largest Latino Democratic club, one of the largest in the country, endorsed me.
How much did you pay for it?
Oh, are you insulting Avance?
Yeah.
Wow. That is really a big move. The largest Latino Democratic club in the country was just insulted by you. They voted for me. 85% voted to endorse me. I think that says everything. The difference between you and I will accept everybody and represent everybody and never insult any Angelino.
Oh, you've insulted this Angelino consistently.
Okay, let's go on. Let's move on, and we'll go to the next question.
Yeah, we're going to talk about some of the things that you can do, and hopefully that you will do, because these are things that everybody notices each day when they want a functioning city. And it's basic stuff. Somebody calls 311, they don't want to be bounced around all day. The last time we tried to plant trees, to mitigate heat, we missed it by 30,000. LA Metro. There's $122 million being spent because people don't feel safe. They want to get ridership up, but people are scared. They're uncomfortable. They don't want to ride the system. So the question here is, why is there such a problem getting the basics done in this city? Congresswoman, you first.
Well, when you talk about Metro, I think Metro has a lot of problems. First of all, it absolutely needs to be safe. I think it's problematic when you have 3 different police departments, 3 different police agencies in charge of safety. That is something that needs to change. And I think that there has to be a commitment and the drive, and that's why there needs to be new leadership. We need bold and decisive leaders that say we are going to clean up the city. We are going to make sure that services are distributed equitably around the city, and we're going to get the job done.
Mr. Caruso?
Well, Cassandra, who's sitting right here, who's a parent at Par Los Niños, a school that my wife and I have been involved with for over 30 years. We were there a few weeks ago, and she asked me to ride Metro with her, to experience with her what it's like for a mom and a child to be on Metro every day. It was horrifying. The filth, the amount of encampments at the platform, the amount of people shooting up. The elevators didn't work. The escalators didn't work. It's loaded with homeless, intimidating. We ended up riding that metro for a couple of hours through different stops. It's a failure of leadership. It's a failure of courage and just understanding business. The mayor's office needs to have executive skills. These are the basics. To clean something up, my God, we have failed this city. The system is broken and it's failed. I have the joy, the beauty, and the energy to come from the outside looking in and saying I have the skill and the energy to clean up this city.
Your time is up, but I do have a follow-up, Mr. Caruso, because running a business, and we've learned that from innumerable politicians, and I'm thinking in particular of former President Trump. Even Mike Bloomberg in New York had some difficulties because he was used to running a business, but not a city. Why do you think that because you're a successful business person, and you are, that gives you the insight and the skills that transfer into running a city the size and complexity of Los Angeles?
It's a great question, Charles, and I'll tell you the answer to it is not only have I built a small business into a pretty good sizable business, which I'm proud of with a great team of people, I served 3 mayors. I served under Tom Bradley running DWP with him and my fellow commissioners. I served under Dick Reardon. I served under Jim Hahn as president of the police commission. A great track record with each of those. So I understand how the city works. Karen has never worked at the city. She's never been responsible for a city department. I have. I have the best
and your
of
time
both
is
worlds.
your time is up.
Thank you, Charles.
Thank you very much. Our next question goes to Giselle Fernandez.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Mr. Caruso, my first question is for you, and this question hits at a voter trust issue.
Yeah.
You have said the reason you left the Republican Party in 2019 is because it no longer reflects your values. Your critics call you disingenuous. You have countered that times have changed, the party has changed, and so have you. That you are a fiscal conservative but socially liberal, pro-immigrant, and pro-choice. So here's the question. What made you turn away from the Republican Party in 2019, just 3 years ago? And what made you choose then the Democratic Party? Be specific, please.
I will be specific. The Republican Party, as we see even unfolding today in a greater degree, Giselle, is not respecting workers' rights, is not respecting human rights. It started a long time ago when I left. I am a grandson of immigrants. I remember my grandparents, both paternal and maternal, very well, the struggles they had, the respect that they wanted, the shame that they had that they didn't have money or spoke the language. And you look fast forwarded today, and we have Republican governors that are putting immigrants on buses and planes and sending them to other cities and using them as props. I don't want to be a part of that. The Democratic Party that I care about, that I'm a part of, has a really big tent and accept everybody. And we celebrate diversity. We celebrate background. We celebrate those that want to come into this country and just have their fair share of the American dream. That's why I'm a Democrat, and I'm a proud one at that. Thank you.
Another big elephant in the room is your stance on abortion. In a Los Angeles Magazine profile in July 2007, you said you oppose abortion in most cases. Today you say you are pro-choice. What changed?
That was not my quote. You read below that. There was a discussion going on at the time about stem cell research. If you go back to that time, there was a national discussion about stem cell research. That was talking about stem cell research. You go below that, in quotes, I have always believed that government should stay out of the private lives of people. People need to read that full article. I believed it then, I believe it today, firmly.
Congresswoman Bass, you proudly tout being a lifelong Democrat with a strong track record of getting things done. Mm-hmm. But in the past few years, your legislative achievements appear to have been limited. You drafted the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, co-sponsored the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, but in a divided Congress were not able to push those through the Senate. The only bill that you sponsored that's become a law is H.R. 1496, which renamed an LA post office the Marvin Gaye Post Office. But you're running on track record, what you say distinguishes you most from your opponent. How do you reconcile that?
Absolutely. Well, that's actually not an accurate reflection of my track record. President Biden signed a bill that I did on human trafficking just a couple of weeks ago. I'm very proud of the fact that I led the effort to bring hundreds of millions of dollars to Los Angeles in COVID relief, which is how we paid for the tiny homes, the motels, and the rental assistance. I have passed legislation that prioritizes hiring people on transportation projects. I've passed criminal justice reform legislation. I've passed legislation to transform the nation's child welfare system. And I've passed legislation to prevent children from entering foster care. On police reform, I passed it out of the House twice. It failed in the Senate. But when it failed in the Senate, Senator Booker and I went over to the White House and we asked the president if he would essentially do an executive order to implement aspects, sections of the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. What I have focused on, if I can't find a way one way, I find a way another way. I have gotten a lot of things done, and I'm very proud of my legislative record.
Thank you, Congresswoman. And our next question goes to Seth Lemon.
All right, we're going to start with the Congresswoman again. In the last debate, Congresswoman Bass, you said that you did apply to USC's social work program before you were granted that scholarship valued at around $95,000 back in 2011. However, the Times said that in an interview last fall, you admitted that you did not apply. Now, federal prosecutors, they haven't indicated any inkling of a criminal investigation that targets you specifically, but they do say your time there is critical to their case. We also know you sponsored a bill in Congress that would have given USC more access to federal funding, and you requested an exemption from the Ethics Committee in order to receive that gift, an exception to that rule. So can you tonight make it clear for us, did you formally apply for that program? And in light of emails that have come out that show the dean who was indicted wanted to gain favor with you, do you regret accepting that award?
No, I don't regret accepting the scholarship, and I said that before. I worked nights and weekends to earn a master's in social work so that I could protect the nation's most vulnerable children, and I'm very proud of that. I asked the Ethics Committee for permission to see if it was okay for me to accept the scholarship, and they said it was. What a lot of people don't realize is that I was on the faculty of USC for many, many years, had a strong relationship with them, and that legislation that I introduced, first of all, never went anywhere at all, no hearing, no vote, nothing, but that was a piece of legislation that the social work profession had been trying to get passed for over 20 years. Right now, that legislation is being carried by a Republican from another state. That legislation would have assisted the social work profession, but it would not have directly given money to the University of Southern California.
All right, but to be clear, you formally applied, completed that
applied
application.
for the program.
All right. Mr. Caruso, as chairman of USC's Board of Trustees, you promised transparency, but during your tenure, the university faced several scandals. We're talking about sexual violence, an admissions debacle, and much more. The university even paid out more than $1 billion in settlements, and you promised to release reports publicly, but never did. Why weren't those reports released, and how can LA taxpayers trust that you actually mean and will do what you say?
Well, first of all, just to be clear, the $1 billion plus that was paid by USC is not taxpayer dollars. That was USC money. USC is not funded by taxpayers.
Right, but as trustee, you were in charge of that. Like as mayor, you would be in charge of the financial dealings
So
with the city.
let's just go back to the other test. First of all, that's an important question. I want to answer it. But there's an inconsistency in the Congresswoman's answer. She said, I never applied. The court filings say she never applied. The dean says she never applied. And now she's saying she applied. So just for the record. But on that case, I was brought in as chair. I was not chair at the time that happened to clean USC up, and I did. The LA Times headline, when USC was in a crisis, they called upon Rick Caruso. It's widely reported in the LA Times that I was the one that led the cleanup with a lot of help of others. The reason we didn't release a report, we talked to experts, many of them, that said releasing any information is just going to cause more horrific pain to those that have been terribly, terribly wounded.
All right. Your time
So we
is up.
chose not to do it for that reason, to protect them.
I have a quick question for you on that, Congresswoman. I don't know about you, but when I've, in my past, had things like bank loans, anything with a large amount of money, I tend to keep records of that. Do you have a record of the application that you say you actually made out?
I do.
Can you make that available?
I will, but let me just say.
When?
In the next couple of weeks. But
Before the election?
Before the election. Let me just say that Mr. Caruso said that he didn't release the report because it was going to cause too much pain. The problem is the women who were the victims asked for it, and he made a commitment that he would do that, and then he covered it up. So experts might have said that, but what about the victims? If that's what they wanted, they should have had it.
Mr. Caruso, was that a broken promise?
No, it wasn't a broken promise, because I tell you something, God forbid that was my daughter, and this is the way I looked at it. Would I want a report issued to the public that detailed the tragedy? No, it couldn't have been just to them. It would have been public. The tragedy and the horror that they went through by this monster who was a doctor and caused all these women more pain. What would the point of that have been? Right?
But you knew what was being investigated before.
No,
so why make the
never,
promise if you weren't going to keep it?
I got to tell you something. I wish I never knew, in my mind, what that doctor did. He was a sick, terrible human being that should go away to jail forever. And I can't share what that man did, but it was beyond anything I could have ever imagined when I first called for a private investigation. And I was the one, before I was chair, that said we need to hire an outside investigator because I don't believe the reports we're getting from our administration. I do not tolerate corruption, period. We got to the bottom of it and changed all the leaders in that university.
Okay, Mr. Caruso, thank you very much. Let's talk about money, and this is to you, Mr. Caruso, in specific, your money. You're a very wealthy man. You've got a lot of interests in the city and beyond. And that does raise concerns about conflicts of interest, or at least potential ones. And I looked up the other day, this is the National Conference of State Legislatures, and they advise different state governments about what they think a proper blind trust ought to be. And let me just read you briefly what it says.
Sure.
In a blind trust, an individual places assets that could otherwise create conflicts of interest into a trust. Control over the trust and its assets are given to an independent trustee who may buy and sell assets without the knowledge or consent of the beneficiary. Now, I recognize that states and municipalities all over the country have various interpretations of what is and isn't a proper blind trust. But again, considering your wealth and the office that you now seek, can you describe to everybody what is the nature of your blind trust, and are you willing to go above and beyond whatever the minimum requirements might be for the city of Los Angeles or the state of California?
The answer is yes. I'm going to do the same exact blind trust that Governor Newsom did with his holdings for the state of California. It's best practice. I'm going to follow best practice. I want no involvement in my company. 100% of my time and energy is going to be the mayor of Los Angeles. Period, end of story. Be an independent person running it. I've already stepped away from the company.
Yes, but when you say independent, can you describe your definition of an independent trustee, and will that person have the power, as this particular
I just said yes,
to buy and sell things without? Yes. If they wanted to sell the Grove, could they do it?
They're going to do it.
And would you not know?
That's the decision I made running for office, is that at this point in time, I want to focus my attention on serving the city that I love like I've done for 40 years. And I know that I've got to make this step. We've studied it. I'm comfortable with it. No different than Governor Newsom has done. Same exact trust setup.
I don't know how that could be, because you're in the real estate business, you have projects underway, your company is called Caruso, and you would be making decisions as to who is hired at the Planning Commission, the Planning Department, all of the decisions that would impact your business. Even if you have stepped away from it, you'd be in charge of the people who would make all the decisions on your project.
I've been very clear. I will have no projects under construction in the city of Los Angeles while I'm mayor. I've been very clear about that from the day I announced. From the day I announced. None. Zero. You know, people could claim that I would have gotten benefit of being head of DWP and benefit of my properties. Nope. None of that happened.
Okay. Thank you.
It won't happen as mayor either.
Congresswoman Bass, this one is for you. Mm-hmm. And It is about Scientology. Your opponent introduced that by virtue of ubiquitous commercials about it. But it's a fair thing to ask. And here's what I'm interested in. About 10 years ago, for people who don't know, you delivered a speech because the Church of Scientology was opening, and correct me if I'm wrong, its Los Angeles city headquarters, its new headquarters. And in part, you said, and I'm quoting you now, "I know your goal," meaning Scientology, "and your commitment is truly to make a difference." Recently, when asked about that, you said that you were unaware of how controversial, I'm paraphrasing you now, but you were unaware of how controversial the Church of Scientology has been. And had you known it at the time, you now say, you would not have given that speech. So my question to you is, considering that Scientology has been in the news for decades and decades before you made that speech, is it really credible? Are you asking voters to believe that 10 years ago you were totally unaware?
No. No, I am not. I certainly knew of some of Scientology's abuses. I didn't know the depth of them. I learned it later. Let me just say that I am a lifelong Baptist. I've never been affiliated with the Scientology religion. I was there for ribbon cutting along with a number of elected officials. And frankly, if I had to do it all over again, I wouldn't have gone.
And why?
Because, as I have learned the depth of their abuses, and have talked to a lot of people that were affiliated with Scientology who have broken away from Scientology. That's why.
You say, though, that you were aware of some things. So why speak? I mean, at the end of the day, you can control your own schedule.
Absolutely, I can. And as I said, in hindsight, I wouldn't have done it.
But then why?
Then why?
Yeah.
Because it was a ribbon cutting that a lot of other elected officials were attending, and I attended it as well.
Is the kind of research you did before doing that speech 10 years ago indicative of the kind of research you might do as mayor?
No, absolutely not. I would do much deeper research and would have much more equipment to do that with, much larger staff.
Mr. Caruso, the purpose of this ad was what? Because some people can come away and say, well, that was kind of a cheap shot.
Oh, there's a lot of them.
This is all about either one of us wanting to have one of the most important jobs in the United States, being the mayor of this city and being in charge of 4 million people. It's about leadership, it's about integrity, it's about credibility, it's about character, it's about judgment. And so here we go with the judgment. Not only did she give the speech, but then up until 2019 gave congressional proclamations heaping praise on Scientology, right? We've got the congressional record. It didn't stop at the speech, right, Karen?
I have no idea what he's talking about.
Mr. Caruso, your time is up, but respond. Let's give you
I have
30
absolutely
seconds.
no idea what he's talking about, but what I do know is that Rick Caruso is running a desperate campaign with a Republican strategy to consistently attack me because he's not doing well in the polls. He spent over $60 million trying to convince voters that I am somebody I'm not. The reality is that Angelenos know who I am. I have been fighting on behalf of Angelenos my entire life. I have no idea what he was talking about.
We're going to leave this one.
I just want to finish
quickly.
We will give you the list of congressional proclamations that she issued up until 2019 on Scientology. So you'll have it, and you can
show them to me.
I will. We'll give you a copy.
All right, we're going to move on to homelessness because this really does not need an introduction. It is the issue in this city.
Yes.
You both have used the word crisis. You both have plans. Mr. Caruso, you want to get more people into shelters. The goal is 30,000 new shelter beds in the first year. Vacant government land, underutilized buildings. Congresswoman, you say you can house more than 17,000, speeding up, expanding programs, combining interim and permanent housing. But here's the thing, because the people out there listening and watching right now, they've heard variations of this before. More beds, more buildings, more programs. They've taxed themselves twice.
That's right.
They were told to be patient. But now, and we hear this all the time from listeners, from viewers, they look around and they say, it's not better. Actually, it seems worse.
Right.
And so they're losing hope. So many people, they really wanted to help, but now they're to the point of saying, you know what, clear the encampments. I don't care anymore. Just do something. So I want you to spend the minute that you have talking to them, the people out there right now who were and are really heartbroken over this, but are saying, you know what, I'm I'm done. Congresswoman, you first.
Well, first of all, in my plan, I believe that we need to get people off the streets immediately into interim housing. But we have to address why they are unhoused to begin with, because if we don't do that, they'll be right back on the street. My opponent wants to essentially round up people and warehouse them in shelters, and that's something that was done many years ago, and it just doesn't work. I do understand that people are fed up with this, and they want folks off the street, but we have to make a commitment to actually solve homelessness, because if we do not, people will be right back out on the street again. I'm frankly worried that some of the supports that we were able to get during the COVID crisis, the money that I championed to come into Los Angeles, is going to run out. And I'm worried that there's going to be another spike in homelessness.
Let's talk about another kind of support, though, because
Yes.
a lot of your plan, the points depend on each other, and they depend on the existing programs, the existing
Yes.
infrastructure, which is not working. I mean, we can look out there and see it. We gave back $150 million in
That's
federal
right.
grants recently because of, and we can sum this up as bureaucracy. So
Right.
why are you confident that this is even going to work?
Because
if
I'm
it's already out
confident
there?
that I could deal with that bureaucracy, that's why. Because I believe the only way to address this problem is to involve the federal government. The federal government has got to relax some of the requirements, and so does the city. Because for too long we have addressed this problem like we weren't even trying to end it. We were just trying to reduce homelessness, and it keeps expanding. So we have to relax some of the regulations, and we have to have the city and the county, the state and the federal government and the private sector all aligned.
Congresswoman, thank you. Mr. Caruso, you're
Well, here we got a great example of the lack of accountability. She said the federal government should reduce all the regulations. You're a powerful woman in Congress. Why didn't you do that? Because it was so overregulated, we sent back $150 million. Do you know that we have sent back more money in the last few years than we've used in the last couple of years? You could have stepped in and do that. Listen, I understand everybody's pain and heartbreak and sorrow seeing people living and dying in the street. It's tragic. I've walked the streets. It's terrible. I think, again, but for the grace of God, that's one of my children. How would I want them treated? That's what's fashioned it and the best practices. Here's what we know. You bring them inside, you give them care with dignity and humanity, and then you give them the services they need, psychiatric services, drug addiction services, retraining. They have programs that have a 94% success rate. We know there's a path to success. There hasn't been a strong will to do the right thing. I will do the right thing.
Thank you.
Now our next question from Shar Jossell.
Thank you. Mr. Caruso, you've only built one apartment building in the city of Los Angeles, and the cheapest unit at the luxurious 8500 Burton Way starts at $6,300 a month for a 906 square foot one bedroom. That makes the lowest cost apartment unit more than double the median cost for a one bedroom. Now, you're an LA native who's made $4 billion off of local real estate. Why has affordable housing become a priority for you only now during the race for mayor?
Because it's the number one job for the mayor. It hasn't been my career. If I would have focused on housing, I would have been building housing. I built retail centers. That's my job. But let me tell you what I have done, what my wife and I have done. We've been very focused on making sure that people don't end up on the streets. We've donated about $150 million to families at or below the poverty line. We have 300 scholarships in the city of Los Angeles. We have kids that go from third grade all the way through college. During COVID, we gave them food, supplies, laptops. We're in about 6 different schools, Operation Progress, Para Los Niños. So everybody has a different way of leaning in and helping their fellow man in Los Angeles. I've tried to do my best. But as mayor, we've got to have affordable housing. We're 500,000 units short. I didn't see the Congresswoman, any bill, saying we're going to build more housing in Los Angeles. She's represented us for 20 years. But I will focus on it as mayor. I know how to build, and I'll use those skills.
I'm interested in knowing how you personally define affordable housing.
Well, I think it's different levels. First of all, you need housing. What we can't do is continue to do what we're doing. And here's what happens with politicians that have no business sense. We are building housing for homeless, $800,000 a unit. $800,000. That's taxpayer money. There's private companies, we can build them for $60,000 a unit. That's affordable by anybody's standard, and that's what I'll do.
Congresswoman, you'll have a chance to respond, but I want to ask you a question first. You spent years serving in California's legislature and then the United States Congress, where you could have worked to reform building regulations on state and federal levels, but you didn't. So what are you going to do differently as mayor that you haven't been able or willing to do before to make it easier to build affordable housing?
Well, again, let me just go back to my record and say that I have spent many years working to prevent children from falling into homelessness. When I was Speaker of the House, we passed a housing bond for foster youth. We passed legislation that allowed foster youth to stay in care for 3 extra years so that they didn't become homeless when they were 18. In Washington, D.C., we passed legislation to prevent children from going into foster care, period. In the last several years, I have brought home millions of dollars to my district. I do just represent one district. I don't represent the entire city. So we have brought resources into programs for domestic violence shelters, for shelters for housing for veterans. Now, coming back home and working as mayor, because the crisis has exploded to the extent that it has, we do have to get rid of regulations. So I am definitely ready to do that now. And I do have to say, you are a builder, but you still have never built 1 unit of affordable housing.
Okay. Let me ask a quick follow-up for both of you on this. I was listening to you as you guys were talking about what you would do or hope to do. I've been in Los Angeles now for about 26 years. I have had a discussion about homelessness, about building affordable housing with innumerable mayors sitting in that city hall office that both of you are now seeking. Every one of them, everyone, Republican, Democrat, they all said, and I believe them, that they wanted to end or mitigate homelessness, that they wanted to build affordable housing. Why do each one of you, in 30 seconds each, please, why do each one of you think that you are going to succeed when all of your predecessors for a quarter of a century failed?
You know why? Because this problem has exploded to the point of being an emergency. And I would, on day 1, declare a state of emergency, but I will tell you that's not good enough. There needs to be a federal state of emergency, and this needs to be responded to, just like we're responding to the hurricane. There needs to be a FEMA-like response. I have been trying to deal with this problem. In 1993, in South Central, we were trying to take over motels to address the homeless situation at that point in time.
Mr. Caruso?
As your mayor, I'm not going to wait till there's an emergency to take action. I'm going to deal with it long before it turns into an emergency. But yes, we do have a crisis. I tell you why I'm going to do it. Because I have tackled very complicated things. I have a track record, a proven track record of having tough problems and having solutions for those tough problems. You should look at my track record, whether at DWP, whether at the police. Everybody said we can't reduce crime. We reduced crime 30% to levels not seen since 1950. So I know how to tackle problems. I'll tackle homelessness.
Thank you, Mr. Caruso.
Thank you.
Now to Seth Lemon.
All right, we want to talk about the police department here in the city. You have both called for ramping up the hiring of more LAPD officers. Most cops on the force, though, they live outside the city. They're probably shuttling back and forth from Santa Clarita or wherever to come to work. And beyond that, they probably could not afford to live in the city if they wanted to. There's no residency requirement for them. Congresswoman Bass, some progressives, they've pushed for so-called defunding, but City Council increased the police department's budget this year to $3.2 billion. That is just under 30% of the overall budget. The lone council member who voted against that said that LA has not done enough for prevention. So how do you plan to rally the police department behind you, knowing that many officers say morale is lacking, while still balancing the need for some long arc change?
Well, first of all, I do think that in some neighborhoods, they want to see an increased police presence. And the way to do that is to move officers off of administrative duty immediately. Then we can get police officers on the street. We absolutely do need to bring the police department up to its full force of what the city can afford. And I also agree that we need to invest seriously in prevention, because what we've done over time is that all kinds of problems have developed in our city, and instead of investing in solving those problems, we've left them to the police to do. I don't think when you go into the academy you plan to deal with mental illness or substance abuse. If we can address some of those problems, that will also allow police officers to actually do the job that they signed up for. So we can say and give all kinds of incredible numbers. My opponent says he wants to hire 1,500 police officers when he knows that the academy can't even fill a class now. And so we do need to look at housing. We need to look at housing for teachers, firefighters, essential workers in healthcare, as well as law enforcement.
Mr. Caruso, with response times to emergency calls increasing, it's clear that we do need to at least fill the vacancies that we have. But how do you plan to attract police officers that are invested in building relationships with the people that they serve in these communities? And knowing that we can't combat crime only with cops, does your plan include any measures beyond just hiring?
Yes. I will answer that. I just want to describe the difference here of somebody that's been responsible for a police department, LAPD, and understands the operation of a police department, and somebody who doesn't. And on day one, it's going to report directly to the mayor. You cannot move 300 officers that you're talking about behind us onto the streets. 90% of those officers, 80% of those officers are behind a desk because they're injured. So that can't happen.
Not according to Chief Moore, but go ahead.
Oh, we'll ask Chief Moore about that.
I did.
And that's only 300. Most of them have injuries. I did it before with Bill Bratton. We have to change the culture. There are so many good men and women that want to serve and protect, and they want to do it in the right way, respect the community, do the best of reforms, which we have to have. But right now, there's a leadership that's not allowing them to do their job. Why would they apply? So we only have 23 people in the academy. We have 880 officers we're short on the streets, thanks to the leadership we have today.
I'm curious, Mr. Caruso, and also Congresswoman Bass, how would you rate the performance of LAPD Chief Michael Moore? Mr. Caruso, 30 seconds.
I don't think Michael's had the opportunity under this mayor to do his job, so I don't think it's fair to give him a rating. When I'm mayor and I'll give him the opportunity to do his job, then we'll see, and then I'll judge him.
Congresswoman?
I don't think that I could rate him either, but what I do say is that Los Angeles Police Department needs far more accountability and transparency. I don't know what his goals were. If I'm elected mayor, I would certainly evaluate him and give him a chance.
I'm still not hearing how to actually fill a recruiting class, though. Very quickly, both of you.
I can tell you. It's leadership. It's walking into that office. It will change the culture.
If they can't, so is that the chief's fault?
And
is it the mayor's fault?
No, it's the mayor's fault because they're told, listen, when
Because if there's only 23, there must not be leadership.
There's not leadership in the mayor's office. The mayor's office, I'll tell you, when Cassandra and I were walking Metro, we're on Metro, LA Times was with us, we ran into 3 cops. We said, why does it look so bad? They said, we are not allowed to do our job. We are not allowed to enforce the code of conduct, which is the law, right? And that's what's happening. It's coming down in roll call.
Your time is up.
Well, but, you know, in fairness, it was a question that it should be answered because it's critical. This city is on a spiral with crime. Murders are up 50%.
Now, to be clear, would you use the police department in enforcing clearing homeless encampments?
No. What you do is you make sure you have beds. That's why I have 30,000 beds. Plus the 14,000 we currently have will house the homeless we have. Her plan only starts out doing half. It's like when somebody else wants shelter, we say, I'm sorry, we're booked for the night. No. Build a safe, decent bed for everybody.
Congresswoman, quick response.
Yes, again, he is talking about building shelter beds. Shelter beds, we do need shelter beds, but he doesn't have a plan for after shelter beds. You have to build shelter beds,
yes,
and then you have to move people into permanent supportive housing. You need to have counseling. You need to address why they were unhoused. His plan, to me, is actually a throwback to the past.
I want to go back, Congressman, for a minute to the topic that my colleague Seth brought up about LAPD. I want to read you a quote from, I believe she's a good friend of yours, or at least an old friend of yours.
She's a friend that disagrees with me.
You know who I'm talking about.
I do.
Melina Abdullah, who is one of the organizers of Black Lives Matter. And she wrote recently in LA Progressive an essay, and she took aim at you. And she said that your pledge to increase police resources, and this is her quote, harkens to a 1994 crime-style pro-police system that puts targets on the backs of black people. Your response, 30
My
seconds.
response is I disagree with that. We do have an increase in crime, and we need to address that crime. I have friends that disagree with me. There are people that believe in defunding the police. I am not one of them. I believe in stopping the crimes today and preventing the crimes of tomorrow by making serious investments in the community. And that's one thing that is very different from 1994. We need to invest in crime prevention and intervention strategies, many of which I pioneered when I was the executive at Community Coalition.
Congresswoman, thank you. We're going to go back to our panel now. Shar?
This next question is for both candidates, with Mr. Caruso answering first. According to a recent report conducted by the Center for the Study of Hate and Extremism, between January 1st and June 30th of this year, hate crimes have increased by nearly 20% across the board as opposed to this exact same time period last year in 2021, with a noticeable uptick specifically affecting Black, Asian, and Jewish communities, and the transgender community. In what ways will your leadership as mayor help curb these assaults and prevent the statistic from further increasing?
Yeah, it's terrible. Actually, when you take a look at it over 2 years, it's up 200%. Hate incidents in the city of Los Angeles. It's out of control. And again, one of the problems we have, when I was the police commissioner with Bill Bratton and my fellow commissioners, we instituted community policing and SLOs, senior lead officers. We have to have officers walking a beat. One of the best ways to prevent crime is the visibility of an officer and the visibility of a black and white in a neighborhood. That's just the reality of how it works. When you're 880 officers short, you cannot cover the geography of Los Angeles. It's massive. So what's happened is people that want to take advantage of those that you're talking about being targeted, there's very little response time, but there's also no presence. So we got to bring back community policing. We have to build up senior lead officers. And yes, prevention programs. All of those kind of things, which I did when I was on the police commission. But you also have to have zero tolerance, and you have to hold people accountable for that crime. If it's a misdemeanor, it has to be held accountable by our city attorney or our district attorney.
Thank you.
Congresswoman?
Well, let me just say that not all communities want to see an increase in police presence. That is not a solution in a lot of communities. A lot of communities want to see a serious investment in crime prevention and intervention strategies. And as I mentioned, I pioneered some of those when I was an executive at Community Coalition. It has to be a comprehensive response. Otherwise, we're going back to the past of having patrols and increased presence that leads to pretextual stops and all of those other things that lead to communities, especially black and brown communities, being over-policed. We need to prevent the crime. You asked specifically about hate crime, though, and I think hate crime needs to be aggressively prosecuted. But one thing that I think is missing is that there needs to be a lot of education, public education, because I believe that the crimes that are documented are actually underreported, that there's a lot of anti-Asian hate, there's a lot of hate against African Americans, anti-Semitism, but communities need to know that they actually have the power to report those crimes, and they will be prosecuted.
Congresswoman, thank you very much. Next question goes to Giselle Fernandez.
I want to address the all-important Latino vote that could swing this election if they turn out to vote, and turnout is an issue. Latinos say that both parties neither court nor cater to their needs, and when polled, they care most about the economy, jobs, education, and yes, of course, immigration, as well as the renewed threat against the status of DACA recipients, which could impact 200,000 young people with DACA status here in Los Angeles. So here's my question to both of you. Why should Latinos come out and vote for you over the other? And will you make a commitment tonight to appoint Latinos to your administration if you become mayor? Let's start with you, Congresswoman Bass.
Absolutely, that commitment is there, that commitment is strong, and that commitment is reflective in everything that I've done. So I have worked in the Latino community. I worked in hospitals and clinics in East Los Angeles. I have built African American and Latino coalitions. In 1990, when I founded Community Coalition, it was specifically built as a Black and Brown coalition. I worked in the 1980s welcoming and assisting refugees from Central America at the founding of those organizations. And then I have been a leader in Congress on immigration reform. I'm also supported by almost all of the Latino elected officials and many Latino community organizations. So the reason they should support me is because I have decades of involvement on the ground in community organizations, not just supporting them from afar, but actually working side by side. We organized citywide marches to support immigration reform and was one of the leaders supporting DACA in Congress and also driver's license in Sacramento.
And will you appoint Latinos to administration?
Oh, I said that first. That was the first thing I said. Absolutely, because I've done that everywhere.
Mr. Caruso?
The Latino population in this city is 50%. It's half of the city, and it doesn't feel heard. I hear them. I am spending a lot of time in the Latino community, and I have my own life. Tina and I have many programs for education, for healthcare in the Latino communities, and we're proud of that. My family roots are in Boyle Heights. So I also understand that community and very proud of the history of our family there. But the Latino community has also been hurt more than most communities because of COVID, because of what's happening with inflation, because of affordability, because of crime. And yes, they need to be in City Hall. When I was endorsed by Gil Cedillo, I made a commitment that the Latino community would have representation in my administration equal to their representation in the city, and they should. You have to have people in City Hall that understand the culture, the lifestyle of the community that they're serving. We need to be servants of the people, and I would certainly like to have their support and their vote, and I'll tell you, I'm proud of the Avance endorsement. So
your time is up.
I think that says a lot about the Latino community.
California is a sanctuary state, as you know. If Ron DeSantis or Brian Kemp shipped migrants to Los Angeles, how would you handle their arrival? And how would you take on the governors of those states? Mr. Caruso?
Welcome them with open arms. We have a place here for you in LA. You're welcome here in LA. Los Angeles can't be a great city unless we're accepting everybody and allowing everybody to have their fair share of the American dream. My God, my grandparents had it, I've had it. I've been abundantly rewarded in the American dream. That's why I want to give back. And people that are looking for a better life, how could we do anything other than say, come, we'll take care of you, and embrace them with dignity, humanity, and safety. And that's what I would do as mayor.
And to the governors of those states?
I'll have a word or two with them. It's wrong. But you know what? Let them go be knuckleheads and let them go do bad things. We're going to do the right thing. And that's what's going to guide me as mayor. Every day doing the right thing, accepting them as the right thing.
I don't want to let them go and do bad things. I want to defeat both of them in the next 33 days. Both of them are up for re-election, and both of them should be defeated. The governor of Florida, the governor of Texas. But the question was, what would I do? I would absolutely do everything I could to take care of the individuals. I would try to reconnect them with their families. I would make sure that they had legal assistance. I would make sure that they had health care. I would make sure that their children would be enrolled in school. I would deal with them in the way that I think that we should welcome. That's what I would do.
Thank you very much. Next question is to both of you, and we'll start with Mr. Caruso on this. So as I'm sure you both know, LAUSD was just, unfortunately, the victim of a hack, and it caused great, and understandably, great consternation, and they decided in the end not to pay the ransomware, and that has its own consequences. So my question first to you is, do you think that the city government of Los Angeles, because I know you have no control over the school district, but do you think that the city has systems in place to protect adequately against future hacks? And if not, what do you think the solution might be?
Well, it's a really good question. I don't know the answer because I'm not inside a city hall, but it's one of the first things I would do as mayor. You've got to make sure that all of the systems are protected, that people's personal information is protected. I've done it in my own company. We did it at USC. It's massively complicated, massively expensive, but worth the investment to do it. It will probably take hundreds of millions of dollars to do that. And I hope it's up to speed. I hope it's up to par. But we have to do that, yes. But I can't answer the question without actually having the data that's presented to me.
Congresswoman?
What I would do would be to consult Homeland Security and bring in cybersecurity technical assistance and receive and solicit support from the federal government. We are the second largest city in the country. We are a target for terrorism. So it is a national security issue for there to be strong cyber protections here. What the status is today, I do not know.
Can I just say, I think we need to be taking care of ourselves. It's fine if you want to go ask the federal government what they think, but I don't want to be dependent on the future of our great city on what the federal government is going to do for us and the time it would take to do it. That's the difference between, I think, Karen and myself. I'm going to take action now. We'll get the best and the brightest minds to take a look at it, give us the recommendations of what to do. Happy to consult the federal government, happy to consult the state government. But we need to take care of our own problems. One of the problems we've had is we're waiting for everybody else to do something and we're full of excuses. Let's just get stuff done.
All right, the time is up and we do want to get to one more topic.
All right.
If we can.
Yeah, one last question here, and this is looking ahead to something you need to do a lot of work for in your first term, and then maybe, and go to and enjoy if you get a second. The Olympics are coming in 2028. Have either of you met with the organizing committee? The members were in town a few weeks ago looking over the venues. They say they're pretty optimistic about the financial outlook. The 84 games, they had a surplus, but we know how it goes most of the time. Cities go well into the red, the kind of numbers that would wipe out a whole budget department. So can you promise taxpayers that they're not going to have to serve as a backstop for any of the overruns, Congresswoman?
Absolutely, I would promise taxpayers that. I have not met with the Olympic Committee. I have met and talked to Casey Wasserman. The difference between him and I is that I could pick up the phone and call Secretary Mayorkas from Homeland Security. He would have to introduce himself.
Oh, I think he would take my call.
I'm not sure.
I'm pretty sure he'd take my call.
I'm not sure.
I'm pretty sure. We'll probably go out to dinner, we'll have a drink, we'll get to know each other.
Have you
I'm sure get along just fine.
Have you talked with the committee members, and can you tell people that they're not going to have to pay for this?
I'm dear friends with Casey. I've been a friend with Casey for a long time. I have a lot of confidence in Casey. I can tell you that there will not be a dime spent by the LA taxpayers on this. I will use my business skill to make sure. But what worries me more is we're going to have a big lens on the city of Los Angeles.
Yes.
Do we want it looking like we want it looking now?
That's right.
Do we want the homeless, the encampments, the crime, the dirt, the graffiti? We got the World Cup coming, and we're going to put this on the world stage. We need to get it cleaned up. Okay. And there's a big difference between how I'm going to approach it and Karen, right? We've got to change and make this city livable and clean and bring the luster back. That's what I'm excited about. I'll get that done.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Caruso. Well, it's time for the grand finale of the debate, and that's the closing statements. I know time goes by when you're having fun.
You want to do another hour?
Let's do it. We're here.
So this time it is Congresswoman Bass who goes first, then followed by Mr. Caruso.
Closing statement?
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank everyone who has put this debate together and to all of you that are watching. Angelenos need a mayor they can trust to fight for them, and tonight's debate showed that the difference is clear. There is only one pro-choice Democrat in this race and only one candidate who has spent her life fighting for Angelenos. So let's get big things done together. Let's move our city in a new direction so we can solve homelessness, make our neighborhoods safe, and make LA a healthier, less stressful, and more affordable city. Our city is indeed in crisis, but our city is still the city of angels. In this election, let's remember who we are and what we believe in and vote for change rooted in our shared values. Let's come together and vote for a brighter, safer, and more prosperous future in every neighborhood and for every family. Thank you so much for your support.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Mr. Caruso.
Thank you to the host. Thank you, KNX, and everybody listening. There is a big difference between Congresswoman Bass and myself, and let me just point out a couple things. Her homeless plan by the LA Times has been reported as unambitious. Even today in the LA Times, it says not a lot of anything new there. We can't keep doing the same thing. We've got to change what we're doing. It's not working. The system is broken. Somebody needs to come in with leadership and hope and courage and wisdom and compassion to change the direction of the city. We have people dying on the streets. We have communities impacted. We have small businesses impacted by encampments. Do you feel better today about your neighborhood? Do you feel like your kids are safe if they go to the park alone? Do you allow them to walk down the street alone? How do you feel about your town? What about your own personal habits? Are you taking off your ring, your jewelry to go out to dinner? This city is on the wrong trajectory. The LA Times said also that Karen Bass is now just leading the parade. The parade is going in the wrong direction. We need to change it.
I'm leading
Thank
a
you.
parade?
Thank you both.
Yep, that's what they said.
Okay, and that concludes the KNX News mayoral debate. Thanks again to both candidates, to our sponsor, Ultimate, to our entire team at Audacy Los Angeles, and to Spectrum News. For Mike Simpson, I'm Charles Feldman. Everyone can agree, don't forget to vote.
The KNX News mayoral debate is sponsored by Ultimate. My vote, my health.
Hear it on demand at knxnews.com and on the free Audacy app.
This has been a special presentation of KNX News 97.1 FM.